We have Jill Dennis, founder of Complywise Offender Management System and Vice President of the Association of Supervised Ankle Monitor Providers. The Louisiana Supreme Court has ordered a second investigation into two New Orleans juvenile court judges, Judge Candace Bates Anderson and Judge Renard Darrensburg, relative to the utilization of ankle monitors and really the follow-up and the follow-up protocols with that. Jill, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Newell. Thank you for having me.
So, Jill, if you would, give us a little bit of the background of how we got to this situation with the court ordering yet a second investigation into these same two judges.
Well, we all know this investigation is much needed. And as one of the very few groups outside the city itself that currently watches juveniles on ankle monitor, we can and are willing to help any investigator fully understand what has been happening. I just wanted to make that clear. But we have to understand, just as recently as January of this year, we had a shooting. NOPD called us looking for answers, and all they knew is the suspect was wearing an ankle monitor. Again, through that investigation, we realized the city of New Orleans has the same problem. It was a juvenile wearing a dead ankle monitor. And because we know that device was dead days before the shooting, we again proved nobody is actively watching. Nobody is reporting in real time. It's the same problem, different provider. And so it's very important that the Supreme Court investigate to highlight the real problems that have already been solved in adult court. And using the offender management system, which is the database designed for law enforcement, and the court itself. If a juvenile system used the offender management system, the right people would know in real time what is happening, when it is happening. And that is the problem that juvenile court has been plagued with since 2023, with problems of not real-time monitoring and no consequences for the juveniles wearing ankle monitors not following the rules.
So in these two cases, there were two deaths. The individual juvenile that was on ankle monitoring while being on an ankle monitor that wasn't working. One 18-year-old killed a tourist and another 17-year-old killed a local tour guide, right?
Right. I mean, there were so many problems leading up to those murders.
And, yeah, I mean, there were a bunch of different failures all along in the process. So we're talking about both hardware, software failures, but we're also talking about operational failures of the court, right, and following up on this?
Right. In adult court, we've solved the problem. Through the use of the offender management system, we are actually able to, in real time, know what is happening, when it is happening, and who acted or failed to act. And the problem in New Orleans is that offender management system has not mandated the use of real-time supervision with standardized, transparent, and accountable reporting process. And that's what the offender management system does. The problem is solved. It's the use of it that the city of New Orleans hasn't solved yet.
So what is the hesitation in juvenile court to improve upon this system?
Really, I mean, there's no answer to it, which is why the Supreme Court is investigating, because it looks more like negligence and incompetence than it looks like an ability to answer the problem, because the answer to the problem is right in front of their face. And if we're going to ensure that the criminal justice system has the information that they need immediately, not only to benefit the criminal justice system, but the whole community, because it protects the whole community. OMS creates the open communication between the providers, law enforcement, and the criminal justice system in real time. So everybody knows what is happening, when it is happening, immediately. And the ability for law enforcement to see it.
Who actually picks the vendors in juvenile court? The juvenile court judges?
Well, there's been news article after news article There was actually City Council last year had made a agreement with OJJ, and through that agreement with OJJ, they began using a group called Teletrax, which were using wrist watch monitors. Now, I know originally when that came out, it was a $4 million contract. Just recently, it was $2 million. However, they only had 10 juveniles in that program. And so there's not a choice. The juvenile judges don't decide, and I believe it is OJJ that decides who is going to monitor those juveniles.
OJJ, the Office of Juvenile Justice, though, that's a state agency, though, right?
That's correct. Now, I will tell you, OJC decides how the reporting process happens and how they respond to violations. That is primarily up to them, and they have to do better.
OJC meaning the Office of Juvenile Court, right?
Orleans Juvenile Court.
Orleans Juvenile Court. I'm sorry, yes. So
yes,
they determine the protocols and how that's going to be handled. And so this is unusual, to say the least, because we had a state judiciary commission look at the actions of these two judges, and it seems as though the Supreme Court was not happy with the findings and have ordered a second investigation to occur. So the Judiciary Commission, I guess they're going to reinvestigate this?
Yeah, I mean, they need to actually investigate it. I believe Isaac Carter, Jacob Carter's brother, requested an investigation. And it does seem like the response that was made to Mr. Carter was that they were not going to investigate it. So the Supreme Court coming in saying, no, we are going to do it is something that not only the Carter family or the Thibodeau family need, but the Hansard family. I mean, we can go on and on. The Toots family. All of these failures of the juvenile monitoring system and all of the people that have been affected by it, they deserve this investigation.
And all of those folks are victims of violent crime as a result of, being perpetrated by juvenile offenders and individuals that were being monitored allegedly at the time. That's using that term loosely.
Failed to be monitored.
Yeah, failed to be monitored. Is there a process by which, when the monitoring company fails, because they know right away when a monitor goes offline, right? They should know.
Yeah, right. So in legislation, we have actually been able to legislate the type of equipment that can be used in Louisiana. So the equipment must tell the provider that there's a strap tamper within 3 minutes, an exclusion within 4 minutes, and tell them that the battery's dead before it actually dies. Exclusions and curfews are within that 3 minute period. So the equipment that is being used, this is not a hardware equipment issue. That isn't where this issue lies. The equipment is good. In fact, whenever they were using BI and they switched over to Teletrax, the equipment used by Teletrax was much more inferior to what was used by BI. BI is good equipment. It wasn't the equipment that caused the failure. It was the juvenile criminal court's use of that equipment and how they were getting the information sent to them and how they were replying to that information that was being sent to them. Their failure to act is what the problem was. The failure for law enforcement to have access is what the problem is.
So in these particular cases, do we know that the vendor actually notified juvenile court that the battery on one of the units was dead and the other one went offline?
There was no real-time reporting from the provider to the court. It was still being done in a way that it wasn't sent immediately within the 30 minutes see, the law requires that once an alert happens, the provider has up to 12 hours to finalize and realize if that alert is a true violation or not. However, once you prove that it is a true violation, you only have 30 minutes to make sure that the court knows that there is an actual violation. The offender management system goes a step further because it allows not only the court to know, but the DA to know, the victim to know, the bondsman to know, and law enforcement to know within that 30 minutes of that confirmed violation. That is what is needed, because a lot of these, because of the legislation that the Attorney General worked on last year, all of these violations are actually new charges when an offender is not following the conditions set by the court. So law enforcement must be able to get that access to that information immediately. And that way they can do their job in protecting the community, because the only thing they have, their decisions when they're on the streets protecting the community is only as good as the information given to them. And right now there's nothing being given to them. And that causes this crisis that we're having, that causes our community to be very unsafe, because there aren't any low-level first-time offender juveniles or adults on ankle monitor. Every person put on ankle monitor is a multiple charge or a violent offender. And the fact that they can be disregarding the orders of the court, creating new crimes, and law enforcement cannot have access. There's no transparency to law enforcement. For lack of a better word, asinine. It is very negligent of our court system to do that.
Has anybody indicated a timeline as to how long this investigation will take?
I have not seen a timeline. I hope they take as much time as they need quickly to ensure that we know what we already really know. We know what's going on. I've been on your show a couple of times. We've been yelling.
No, I know.
Rooftops.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, but I'm kind of curious. What are they doing in the interim? Have they changed anything? Do you know?
That's the problem, because the investigation is great. The investigation is going to do what we need it to do and bring other ears in that may be more willing to act. But right now, it's the same old problems, same old day. Again, I told you earlier in January, we had a shooting. Someone was shot 7 times. And at the end of that investigation, we realized it is a juvenile whose ankle monitor died 3 days before the shooting. And the only reason NOPD was able to get that information is because we were able to get it for them. And that doesn't make sense. It wasn't even us supervising that juvenile. So it doesn't make sense that the system cannot work within itself to solve the problems and protect their community. And it's almost like they just refuse to do that.
Yeah, this is really frustrating. I did a monologue Monday that, on so many different fronts we're failing. And every time that I feel that there's some positive momentum, I'm reminded of so many deficiencies that exist. And I said Monday, I just came right out and said, and this is a classic example of it. This is how a third world country operates. This is what we're watching right here. This is how a third world country operates.
We have met with Councilman King's office. We have asked the Criminal Justice Committee to have another hearing on GPS in the city. We are willing to testify. We have other partners in the criminal justice system that actually run this system that have written letters to Councilman King saying they would come, judges, district attorney's office. They've all written letters to the Councilman King saying they are willing to come and testify that this is a serious problem and it needs to be solved. We haven't heard anything yet. We are waiting on a response and a date, and we are just waiting because that's what's needed. Everybody needs to come together, look at the problem, and actually do real solutions that have proven to work, solutions that we can see from the Tyree Quinn case, from the Nicholas Marana case, that the offender management system is the missing link. It is what links everyone together under one system that allows everybody to have the transparency and accountability and see who was responsible for what, and if they did what they were supposed to do. And if they didn't, let's follow the law and get them out from being supervisors, or make sure that people know that this is where the failure lies.
Yeah, best of luck to you on that. I mean, it has to happen. I mean, this is just mind-numbing that you and I are still talking about this. I mean, we've been talking about this for years on this show. I mean, it's just frustrating that we continue to talk about this. And I just think it's, and I'm always reluctant to say this. This is a lack of sincerity to the problem. We have people being killed. We have people being shot. We have people being jacked up by juveniles who are on electronic monitoring, and no one seems to care. I mean, it just does, and it's a privilege. It's a privilege to go on electronic monitoring. It's a privilege. It's not a right.
To realize, that's correct. And what we need to realize, the problem is not the provider or the equipment being used. It is whether the system that manages both is transparent, accountable, and built to protect the public. And that's
absolutely. And the court needs to be Johnny on the spot and respond and take the appropriate remedial action to violate the juvenile, get that juvenile in court, and get that individual in a confined space, because obviously that juvenile is not worthy of the privilege. And our community is worthy of being safe. Plain and simple.
If the court would at least bring the violating juveniles in, even if they just put them, look, you violated your curfew, you're going to sit for 2 days, 3 days, and most of those juveniles are going to realize we're being supervised. They know what we're doing. We need to follow the rules. Some of them won't. Some of them will have to stay in. But some of them, the ones we can get to, the ones that we can show that really want a change, we can fix this. And it can be fixed. And that doesn't mean putting everyone behind bars.
We can't afford
making sure they
not
know
to,
we're watching.
No, look, don't misunderstand me. We can't afford to not do electronic monitoring. It is an absolute must that it be done. But we got to do it right. And we got to make sure that we have the safety and security protocols in place that are going to be followed. Not that they're just written on paper somewhere, that we actually execute them on them when we need to, quite frankly. And when we need to
answer these questions.
When we need to is when the monitoring company says, "Hey, Houston, we got a problem." It doesn't get any simpler than that.
No, and the city of New Orleans needs to answer a few questions in order for them to have a system that runs right. Who's being monitored? Who's watching it? Who's responding to violations? What is the process for responding to those violations and handling them? And how does law enforcement get this information? Those 5 questions need to be answered.
No doubt. Got to go. Got to get to a break. Jill Dennis, founder of Complywise Offender Management System and vice president of the Association of Supervised Ankle Monitor Providers. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for coming on the show, and have a great and a blessed Easter weekend. We'll be right back, folks. Stay with us.